But for now, we're going to move on and take a live look at Parliament Hill this hour, where right now 2 Liberal vacancies are there following Chrystia Freeland and Bill Blair's resignation. There's going to be 2 by-elections that are going to happen at some point in the near future, and questions are swirling about the possibility about another federal election. With me now is James Moore, former Conservative Cabinet Minister. James, good to see you.
Good to be with you.
So we have the 2 confirmed by-elections. There's a potential third too, because Nate Erskine-Smith has said that he is going to run for the Ontario Liberal leadership. When that happens, what do you believe, and when do you believe, I guess, biggest is that we could see a federal election?
It's still kind of hard to say. You know, it is a minority parliament. Don't forget, there's also perhaps the 4th seat in Edmonton with Matt Genereux, who said that he's also going to be receding from parliament. And there may be others as well. Life has a way of presenting itself in unorthodox ways, and people make different life choices, and it's a minority parliament, so it's hard to know. But look, you know, there's a sweep of by-elections here, mostly in ridings that are Liberal friendly and Liberal strongholds traditionally. And I think that Prime Minister Carney is probably looking to get a handful of people to surround himself around the caucus room, and particularly around the cabinet table, who will be, frankly, Mark Carney loyalists, people who are firm supporters of the Prime Minister, who are probably going to be cabinet nominees, who will be there to be the wingmen of Prime Minister Carney. You saw last week on Parliament Hill, when Prime Minister Stephen Harper had his portrait unveiled, you saw a lot of people who, like myself and others, who were there with Prime Minister Harper. I think Prime Minister Carney wants to have his sort of, for lack of a better phrase, ride or die crew of people who are hard loyalists to him. He inherited this current caucus and most of this cabinet from Prime Minister Trudeau, and I think he wants to replenish the group of people who are around the table with people who are really committed to his vision, his approach, and his style of leadership.
And so we haven't heard a date yet, but the rumblings are there, right, James? You know, we hear about the by-elections that they could happen. The Conservatives are going to start opening up nominations, it sounds like, at some point. You have the Globe and Mail reporting, too, at least that apparently there's been a casual conversation between the Prime Minister and Ontario Premier Doug Ford about the possibility of election. So it seems like there's a lot of signs here along and a few breadcrumbs.
Yeah, about a federal election, though, you still have to have a reason. And the last federal election was just in April. So it's not that long ago. When you're less than 1 year into a mandate, I think Canadian taxpayers, voters, you really need to have a reason to go back to the public. And this idea that it's a minority parliament and it's not quite as efficient, as fluid as a majority parliament might be, they're tough sometimes. But look, you know, 6 of the last 8 federal elections have yielded minority parliaments. 6 of the last 8. Canadians are quite comfortable with minority parliaments. We went for a long time between Joe Clark's minority parliaments of the early 1980s through until Paul Martin's minority parliament to 2004. But 6 of the last 8 have had minority parliaments. And as long as the Prime Minister's agenda is passing in the macro, if there are reasonable disagreements in Parliament, in committees, and there's some delay about the government's approach to things, about the way in which the government is administering the affairs of the day, that's fine, and Canadians aren't upset about that. If there's a massive disagreement between the government and the opposition parties about what the subject matter is of the day, and the government can't address what they think is the dominant topic of the day, that's a reason to go to the polls. If things are getting tough for the government because tough questions are being asked and the committee process is being a little bit more arduous than they would like it to be, that's not a reason to go to the public. But if the opposition is stopping the government from addressing the dominant issue that they think is the focus of Canadians, well, now you have a disagreement on topic. Right. And if Parliament is ground to a halt, that's when you go to the public and you say, we think this is the subject matter of the nation. They think that's the subject matter of the nation. You need to decide who you think should be steering this government in this country. That's a reason to go to the polls. And there's no sense that that's the case today. Both Prime Minister Carney and Pierre Poilievre have been clear that the threats about Canada's trade relationship with the United States, even in a more granular way, the treatment of GM workers in Oshawa and what's happening there and the friction in the auto sector and those loss of those jobs, there's clarity, I think, about what the mission is, which is the economy, cost of living. There's differences of opinion about solution, but that's fine. That's what Parliament's for. It's not what an election is for.
James Moore, former Conservative Cabinet Minister, appreciate your insight, sir. Thank you for this.
Thank you.